Good morning. It was great to listen to you, and it is my great pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you for having me. I'm recovering from a bad case of COVID, and I apologize for not being with you in Berlin, though I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you over Zoom. Again, my apologies. What I'm going to take the next 10 minutes to talk about is the inextricable link between society and business. And I think you said this in your talk just now, but I'm going to make the point that one cannot succeed if the other fails. It's abundantly clear that leaders across government, business, and society can accomplish big things together. You just mentioned developing vaccines in record time, that's one example, or coming together to defend against violence and injustice when the will to do so exists. The collaboration across public and private sectors will be key to building back better in the wake of COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and continued economic disruption. To accelerate progress globally, business must embrace its responsibility to help address some of the toughest challenges the world faces: climate change, equity in multiple forms, economic growth, amongst others. Now, over the next 10 minutes, through examples, I will show you that doing so is not only the right thing to do, rather it is the right business thing to do. It is in our interest to do our part. The question now is, what steps must we take? What steps must business take to contribute to creating a stable, equitable, sustainable world? And where do we start? For business, I believe where we start is with purpose. All businesses should have a reason to exist that goes beyond turning a profit. Nearly a half a century ago, when I left India and went to the United States, the prevailing wisdom was that the business of business is business. I suggest that the business world has been evolving towards a more holistic approach, and the pandemic has only hastened that shift. What do I mean? Take my organization, Deloitte. Deloitte has more than 400,000 professionals around the world. 80% plus are millennials and Gen Zs. When we survey them, which is often, we consistently find that climate change is their number one concern. For 80% of my 400,000 professionals, their number one concern is climate change. This year, Deloitte will recruit 70,000 professionals globally. I speak at college campuses all over the world, and I can tell you that without fail, whether it is in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, I'm asked, what does Deloitte do beyond generating profits? And how are we addressing the climate emergency? Now think about that for a minute. If we, Deloitte, want to hire the very best and brightest and then develop and retain them, we must have a credible response to these questions. So yes, the holistic approach that I mentioned just a minute ago is the right thing to do, but it is also the right business thing to do. And the fact is, business has the skills, resources, and influence to create real lasting societal impact. People know that. Edelman's annual trust barometer tells us that right now people around the world rank business as the most trusted institution in society. As business leaders, we have a responsibility to uphold that trust. That starts with putting purpose at the center of the decisions we make and the actions we take for customers, our people, and the communities that we live and work in. Given the complexity of the issues we now face, society is only going to get us so far without the help of business in developing much needed solutions. And as I alluded to earlier, business can only thrive if society thrives. Now, let's take a closer look at some of the big issues. Let's take climate change, for instance. And I think many of these statistics that I'm going to cite are a pretty common knowledge now, but in 2021, the IPCC report released climate projections which the UN Secretary General described as a code red for humanity. Though it's jarring to hear the climate crisis described in that way, it's not surprising. 2021 was a year that brought historic, deadly flooding in Western Europe and China, uncontrolled fires in the Mediterranean and the Western United States, and heat in the Pacific Northwest so extreme it melted cables and buckled roads. I know, I live in the Pacific Northwest in Portland, Oregon. I experienced it firsthand. The report projected such disasters will soon be far more common and severe. And you know this, it will take trillions of dollars every year for the next 30 years to advance the transition from a carbon-based economy to a sustainable one. No government, no NGO can solve this crisis on their own. Business must play a critical role. We can lead the way by developing climate-friendly products and services, requiring suppliers to meet specific sustainability criteria, and ensuring facilities and operations are more resistant to climate impacts. This is an important area of focus for Deloitte. Even during the pandemic, when many businesses were scaling back, we remained steadfast in our commitment to address big societal issues. In fact, it was during the pandemic that we launched our World Climate Strategy, which includes a commitment to achieve net zero by 2030. I believe we will actually achieve net zero before 2030. As part of this effort, we're working to empower and educate our 400,000 professionals to make responsible climate choices through training. We are also engaging our broader ecosystem to create long-term climate solutions, and we will pull every lever we can to lessen our own impact and contribute to creating a sustainable situation for our entire ecosystem of partners. And we're helping our clients and other key stakeholders do the same. Importantly, we're also working collaboratively with governments to solve specific issues that impact climate. An example that I want to share with you is the perennial stubble burning issue in India. If you've been to India in the fall or winter, you experience it firsthand. Every year, northern India is plagued by plumes of smoke as a result of stubble burning, which is when farmers torch their fields at the end of the harvest. In addition to contributing to emissions, stubble burning has created a massive, massive public health crisis, polluting swaths of northern India and endangering the health of hundreds of millions of people. To address this issue, Deloitte is undertaking an effort with the government to reduce the number of stubble burning incidents. The focus is to build an ecosystem of corporate crop residue management solutions that incentivize farmers to limit burning, develop the infrastructure to enable farmers, including, for instance, equipment and storage space, and implement stubble management technology platform. It's a very tangible example of how business can act now at the community level to move the needle on the climate crisis. The ancillary benefit for Deloitte, remember I said it's the right thing to do and also the right business thing to do. The ancillary benefit for Deloitte is engagement where it matters with key policymakers and deep, deep appreciation from our people in India, 90,000 of whom call India home. Let's take globalization. It was mentioned by, in the previous talk. We're increasingly hearing talk of a reversal in the decades-long trend towards globalization. Billions of people have been lifted out of poverty because of globalization, but it has not worked equally well for everyone everywhere. And there is no longer consensus that the path of globalization followed in the last 25 years, with its positive benefits, represents the best way forward. Profound inequities persist both across and within countries. And amid the pandemic, global migration emergencies, and climate change, the gap is only widening. As business leaders, we have a responsibility and a vested interest in addressing the structural flaws and biases perpetuating these disparities. We must ask ourselves not only what we are doing to generate equitable outcomes, but what more we can do. Let me share some sobering statistics that greatly impact future equity. 60 million children are out of school, and this problem got a lot worse in the pandemic. 800 million adults are unable to read and write. In India, 175 women and girls cannot read and write. 2 billion jobs are expected to disappear to automation by 2030. This represents an enormous but unskilled talent pipeline. So in response, Deloitte launched World Class, our commitment to improving the lives of 100 million people through education and skill building. The goal will help people prepare for the future of work in line with the UN's SDGs. If more companies were to apply the unique capabilities and expertise of their professionals to supporting talent in marginalized communities, we would have a real shot at turning more of today's students into tomorrow's employees. Health equity is another example. The pandemic didn't just expose the disparities in healthcare, it hit home the tragic outcomes that come of them. Again, another example, with the government of Haryana in India, Deloitte piloted an effort called Expand the Ward that offered a potential remedy to underinvestment in public health infrastructure. The project encompassed 5 key integrated interventions, including a remote command and control center, virtual health capabilities, leveraging 3 tiers of medical infrastructure, and the local ASHA workers, community health workers, an education campaign, and a playbook for replication. At a time when the community was being ravaged by the Delta COVID wave, our efforts helped to bring the local fatality rate down by 50%. The collaboration with the government in India relied on telemedicine, essentially computers and mobile phones, to connect doctors to patients in rural and hard-to-reach communities who would otherwise not be able to access medical care. Our project in India advanced health equity and is now being expanded in other districts across the country. And my hope is that we can continue to leverage digital technologies to create better, more equitable outcomes. That is the power of business, collaboration, and innovation. This year at Davos, there was much discussion about history being at a turning point. I agree with the view. And I see it as a call to action for governments, public policy makers like individuals represented in this room, NGOs, and particularly business leaders. The role we need to play for our people, clients, and communities is changing. As the world evolves, the challenges we face are becoming as complex as they are unpredictable. Working together to develop and scale solutions for addressing climate change, advancing equity, and returning to economic growth, amongst others, we can lead the way in establishing the new normal. This is a decisive decade. If we don't act now, it would be an even greater tragedy than these crises themselves. My hope is that the ideas brought forth during this summit will help to ignite productive and impactful discussions, and that we will take the steps, critical steps, together to address these collective challenges. I'm certainly optimistic. Again, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. I apologize that I couldn't be there in person, but COVID has very unique plans, and certainly upended my trip. Thank you again for listening.